Hello everyone, and welcome to game number 2 in our best of 5 series between Saberman Gameslayer and Cubit32 Veivi. Cubit32 Veivi taking game number 1 quite easily, actually. Just very simple. Hey look, we're just going to shut down our opponent's resources and then they can't make anything and then we win the game. It was actually that straightforward and easy for them. We'll see if Saberman and Gameslayer can manage to defend themselves
Well done on finding it.
in game number 2, or if we're just going to have another repeat of that scenario. Only 3 geotherms on this map is worth paying attention to, so those might be quite heavily fought over. Saberman is going to be the first one to found this game, and he did go ahead and get himself into a nice little scientific spot in the corner with plenty of iron next to it. However, Veivi's got potentially an even better slot. He can get plenty of iron established here. Not the perfect adjacency bonuses that it looks like Saberman is going to have, but certainly good enough to get the job done. And on top of that, Veivi has strong access to water right next to him as well, so he will have access to those reactors that we usually see out of the scientist at headquarter level 3. Gameslayer and Cubit have managed to get founded at this point. Gameslayer just going to take an adjacent geotherm, grab that up right away, whereas Cubit, he is elected to found near some more water and some aluminum, so he is going to be trying to use those effectively. And instead of attacking the scientist, Cubit and Veivi have elected to go after the aluminum this game, interestingly enough. However, Gameslayer and Saberman responding in kind. They're going to take away Cubit and Veivi's aluminum with a nice little mutiny. We do have a very aggressive black market this time. Magnetic storms, EMPs, power surges, dynamite, and mutinies all available for use this game. Gameslayer was the one to hit HQ level 2 first. That is interesting. So he is going to be going after a second geotherm tile right away. There is a third, but Cubit has already taken that one. And it does look like Gameslayer is guaranteed to get that. So we do have 2 geotherms, one with adjacency for superconductor over to Gameslayer, whereas Cubit, he is going to be stuck back on the 1. So suddenly silicon potentially becomes a pretty important resource this game if Cubit and Veivi want to be able to fight over power. That said, Gameslayer has identified this himself and has decided he is going to take the best silicon tile on the map that I could see. Nice little high tile with potential medium adjacency bonus should be quite useful for him, without question. Man, really a metal mine. I actually don't mind that at all. That's such a fantastic little mix-up from Saberman. This is the first time we've seen both teams doing this strategy. Just going for straight steel, as much as they can possibly collect, and both with scientists. And so Saberman just throws a little, extra thing in there and is like, you know what? We've killed steel. Steel is actually just dead. I'm going to collect some iron. I'm just going to take this high iron tile. I'm going to start pulling that in, and that should work out brilliantly for him. I mean, that's one of the most valuable tiles they've got going right now, besides power, and like these aluminum are going to be a bit better maybe for the moment, but these are low. Cubit just has medium and low, and one of them is still mutinied away for the time being. He's not getting a hold of that at all. So that's potentially very nice for these players. I like that little iron mix-up. Man, power got out of control fast with 11 steel mills down. Maybe it was 12, then 11, then 10. Regardless, power went a little nuts. Nice little EMP on all this aluminum. Dust storm coming in. Cubit and Veivi probably not going to be happy about that. Although, I suppose Cubit did end up going into wind power instead of solar this time, so that's actually going to be quite beneficial for him. Almost as much as a geotherm right now with that dust storm running. Choosing to go after the wind power with the carbon instead of the solar power with the silicon. A nice little move from Cubit. Considering his opponent was already in that silicon, he could collect carbon himself quite easily from this high quarry he's got down. That's just a nice little change, and the dust storm is just extra on top of that. Ooh, this is actually kind of important for these players in a lot of ways. They do consume an awful lot of power. And it's potentially a lot less debt over the course of this game for them, making it easier to get that kill onto the supporting player for the team that acquires this. Could be a big deal. Looks like Veivi is going to pick it up for about 16,000. Seems reasonable to me. Not absolutely necessary, because debt isn't the end of the world. when you're in a team game, as long as you don't get enough to actually fall down into that D rating and die, but still should be a pretty nice pickup. Gameslayer was our first player to HQ level 3, Cubit not too far behind. Gameslayer does have, we can see a lot more goon squads going over to this team this time. Patent Office is already down for Gameslayer. I don't know if he will be going after Superconductor or Virtual Reality first, but he needs to make that decision. Okay, it is going to be, in fact, Superconductor on over to Gameslayer. Not surprised by that at all. This Geotherm is absolutely fantastic. Pulling in still over $200 a second, getting that Superconductor down should be quite useful. And in a lot of ways, Gameslayer is going to kind of want to force power down this game if he can pull it off. Cubit has committed 3 tiles to power that he can't easily shift around anywhere, where Gameslayer has only committed 2. And so maybe knocking down Cubit's tiles will be worth it with this Superconductor. Although I have to say, that Dust Storm was just so important for Cubit and Veivi, I think, keeping them alive in this game. However, Saberman has managed to push up to HQ level 3 now, and of course, since he got there first, he has managed to take away these water tiles from Veivi. Now, there are magnetic storms available, and that could be important to use against these farms in particular, which are quite vulnerable to them. Interesting to see the farms coming out instead of something like the reactors, as we'll typically see from the scientific player. That said, there were no farms in favor of Gameslayer. He elected to move into glass instead, whereas Cubit was also moving into this farm area. And so it does make some degree of sense for Saberman to be the one with the farms down, since he could get there right away. And of course, they're making a ridiculous amount of money. $180 a second over there. That is not a bad tile at all. Virtual Reality coming up in 5 seconds for Gameslayer, who also has this hacker array down and is working on a carbon shortage. We do not see the double hacker array this time out of Gameslayer and Saberman. Saberman chose to move into 4 farms rather than 3 farms and a hack array. Magnetic storm, magnetic storm, magnetic storm, magnetic storm. Right here. Just go for it. Look, it didn't happen. I'm just saying, magnetic storm right on top of that. Let's count the cash, right? $230. We'll just call it $230 per unit of food. 120 units of food in there, right? I mean, how much are we actually talking there? I don't feel like doing the math properly. I don't think it's somewhere in the vicinity of $27,000 maybe? Maybe more than that? I don't... Look, guys, it's mental math on the fly. And it's on stream, so we all know that you have to fail at doing that. Like, it's just not an option to actually do that correctly, unfortunately. Alright. Well, I gotta say, Saberman and Gameslayer definitely coming back into things here. Veivi, we can see, is in significantly more debt than Saberman is at this point. I imagine in part because Saberman kind of transitioned away from those steel mills when it was appropriate, when power was so ridiculously out of control and iron was actually valuable. You move into those mines, there we go. That's what I'm looking for with those magnetic storms, although I doubt those were full. They might have been. I can't be entirely sure. Still, the mines with 1/3 of the power cost of the steel mills, and when iron was so much more valuable, that is... I don't know if this was exactly how you want to approach that kind of thing. So let's go over a tutorial very quickly on how we actually approach the fact that we're getting shot down by magnetic storms all the time. The answer is not drive steel prices insane and send yourself into crazy amounts of debt with freighters, or, you know, take away your ally's money with all of his fuel. That's what Saberman's accomplishing right now. The answer that we can do is you just launch one, wait for it to land, launch another, wait for it to land, launch the third, wait for it to land, launch the fourth, wait for it to land. Magnetic storm, magnetic storm, magnetic storm. Guys, magnetic storms are beautiful. You gotta use them more. It's crazy. Anyway, that way you can guarantee that at most you have 40 resources in the air at any given time. Now, that's still very valuable to shoot down, but it makes microwing a lot easier, and it's a nice balance between making money and not going into crazy amounts of debt. Speaking of crazy amounts of debt, Veivi is in that nice D rating, and Gameslayer does have quite a bit of cash on hand. He is working on cleaning this one up, but Cubit, he's got the same thing in mind for Saberman. Cubit, with a fair amount of cash himself, does not want to let this one go easily. Saberman is getting defended a bit, and we did end up with a fairly even stock split. That said, Cubit's actually holding on to more cash at the moment. All these farms paying off quite nicely for him. And there has been a solid freeze onto Gameslayer's virtual reality pleasure domes. But that can't keep up forever. It absolutely cannot. And of course, even with just one of them active, Gameslayer will be pulling in a ridiculous amount of money from them, with even 2 adjacency bonuses because of the virtual reality of this game. So this freeze, it's only going to be effective for about 10 seconds here, and then we'll need to see a mutiny, some dynamite, something onto that pleasure dome in order to actually keep that cash down. Saberman wants to pick up teleportation. I can certainly agree with that sentiment this game, or he's just going to take that for $12,000, put himself into that D debt rating, which is a bit scary. But now at least he won't be wasting all of Gameslayer's fuel shipping, you know, trucks every half second. That's what it felt like. All right, water getting played with a little bit here. Cubit making sure to buy up all of it. He can keep his farms running quite easily, even though they appear to be at a loss, because he has such a ridiculous supply of water available, and he has managed to force Gameslayer away from that resource. So that is a nice move by Cubit. He is just trying to make those small moves here and there that will keep him solidly in this game. That said, unfortunately, Gameslayer does have more cash on hand and is to the point where he can purchase Veivi if he wants to go ahead and do that. He hasn't actually pulled the trigger just yet, but he has the option whenever he wants. It looks like they were trying to commit into a shortage, although that may have backfired quite spectacularly. Nope. No iron on hand right now for Cubit and Veivi. Although Cubit, he's saying, all right, you're going to try and sit on that cash for that long. I am going to put in the effort to actually start buying you. And that does mean that as we move into what I'm going to call the late game here, with each of the scientists having been killed off, we do see that Cubit has a significant stock advantage, having purchased 2 stock in Gameslayer. I would also say Cubit, he does have the ability to pick up teleportation if he wants it here. And then one last detail is that maybe it looks like... What it looks like is that Veivi kind of transitioned into iron as he got bought, and so all of these iron tiles were no longer making steel. Like, some of them were on chems, some of them were on iron rather than steel. And so that means that perhaps Gameslayer got kind of the worst end of the deal when it came to these scientific colonies. He didn't really get there in time, so he wasn't able to take advantage of all of those scientific benefits. All that he's got are these basic electrolysis reactors down that aren't going to be costing water. Useful as those are, not as strong of a position as Cubit has with Saberman's territory, I would say.
New pet up for auction. Bidding will
Ooh, wow, that's pretty impressive, actually. Nanotech's important. Somebody take nanotech. I know it costs you straight cash, but it's nanotech. Don't be crazy. Look at this. This is actually happening right now.
9,000.
Cubit doing his absolute best just to keep Gameslayer's money away from him.
12.
Yeah, it's nanotech. It's worth a fair amount of cash. You guys both know that. You can go ahead and get it done. It's all right. Okay. Worth noting that there are no holograms this game, so these spies are pretty much just dropping onto the hacker arrays directly, which is fine. I mean, it might be a bit of a poorly positioned spy, all things considered, but it'll work. And it does mean that Gameslayer is keeping track of Cubit's hacks just fine, and I imagine if we go over to Cubit, we can see he's keeping track of Gameslayer's hacks just fine. I wonder if it would have been valuable, now that Gameslayer has nanotech, to just scrap this hacker array and have moved it here, and then maybe planted the Offworld here instead. That way, it would at least force another spy out of Cubit. Just something to consider. So, Gameslayer elected to move into Offworld markets right away. He's got 2 of them down. Cubit, on the other hand, decided that expanding his scientific colony was going to be the most valuable thing he could do. And so, Gameslayer is trying to fight Offworld, and Cubit is trying to fight Onworld. An interesting thing about Cubit's decision is it will be giving more and more money over to Gameslayer, in particular with his pleasure domes. It is a small thing, but it might be an important factor in all of this. But let's take a look at how the off-world market looks. See if we can figure out what caused these decisions. So fuel is actually okay. Water, if it ever comes down, will be okay. But other than that, we're actually looking at a pretty weak off-world market. So maybe that kind of indicates to us why Cubit decided not to go after it. And at this point, you can see Cubit, he has managed to successfully acquire quite a bit of stock in Gameslayer. He's up to 4 now. That is not a small amount. And Gameslayer, this is just the kind of player he is. He has chosen to get aggressive against Cubit rather than solely defending himself. Maybe he's just thinking, well, Cubit stock is cheaper. I can go ahead and do this, maybe pull something out. He'll also see that Cubit, he doesn't have a ridiculous amount of cash. He's nowhere close to actually closing this game out. Although I don't know if Gameslayer's making the right decision. Gameslayer says he wants this game to end quickly, right? He doesn't think he has the long-term advantage, is basically what he's saying here, which doesn't really line up to me with building the off-world markets. If you think the off-world markets are going to be strong, you're basically playing for the late game automatically at that point. But his stock purchasing decisions are playing for the short game. He says he doesn't want this game to go on very long. Maybe he's more afraid of Cubit's upgrades and what they are doing for him than he thinks he's getting benefit out of these off-world markets. A hologram for auction, and Cubit's just going to take that for 7,000. Gameslayer will likely be keeping an eye out to see when and where that gets used. Something we should be watching out for ourselves as well. Freeze onto these electronics factories, definitely a strong decision. 124 a second from those is going to be pretty nice. Also worth noting that Cubit was surplusing power. He's worried about Gameslayer getting to pull in cash from that, although Gameslayer is actually leaking power at this moment. So that may not have been the best of decisions. Gameslayer still just sticking on those 2 geotherms. Those are the only power has online, although with these solar panels it is nighttime, so it might have been alright to go ahead and surplus that power. Although, that simply does allow Gameslayer to transition these tiles around once again.
Look at all the money.
Maybe it was the correct call, but it also makes these pleasure domes more profitable. It's just a bit of a strange move out of Cubit, and it is worth paying attention to the fact that Gameslayer has actually caught up at this point in the stock race. Cubit is having problems finding places to actually make money while managing to keep Gameslayer's off-world markets knocked offline. And so you can see that Gameslayer, his long-term play is certainly working out here. Also worth paying attention to the fact that Gameslayer did pick up thinking machines before his patent office got knocked down. So all these dynamite, yeah, they hurt for sure. That repair time is not good. It is slowing down Gameslayer, but not as significantly as one might expect at this point. Like, it's just not making the difference that Cubit would want it to here. With that thinking machines active, it's a really, really, really big deal. Look at this, it only takes 30 seconds to repair this off-world instead of a whole minute. And on top of that, it just doesn't cost all that much. Very, very nice for Gameslayer there. I have to say, it does look like Gameslayer's going to take this one. He's got more cash. His stock price is a little bit lower, but he has secured far more of his... Well, he has secured more stock than his opponent has. Gameslayer needs to push to about $600,000 here. I am curious if he's going to commit the $90,000 it would take to even up this stock situation, or if he is going to just say, all right, I just need to push to close this out. That's all I'm going to do. I could see it going either way. Very odd in a lot of ways for Cubit to be doing some surpluses here. I'm going to take the risk. I'm actually going to open up this chart here, and we're going to take a look while that auction's going on of shortages and surpluses. So Gameslayer, he's been doing a lot of surpluses himself. Chemicals, carbon, iron, and food is what Gameslayer has done. Only the one food shortage earlier. But Cubit, he's even done a surplus. We saw him do a power surplus. I'm like 90% sure of that. Now, anyway, he's been surplusing things as well, at least once. And that seems like an odd thing for Cubit to be doing. Regardless, the hacker ray is sitting idle now. Cubit not confident in being able to use it, but not getting rid of it either. Gameslayer just running with an aluminum short. Does Cubit have a stockpile? Cubit does have a small stockpile of aluminum. Well, not small, 400. Small compared to Gameslayer's, though, up at 1,300. Might be enough to overwhelm that short if he times it correctly, but we'll just have to see exactly what happens Gameslayer's sitting on about 200,000 now after that launch. He needs 600 to close out this game at this moment. Cubit, on the other hand, okay, he's made a transition into an off-world market himself. It is hologrammed. Looks like a patent office, though. See, Cubit, he may have put it here hoping it would end up looking like a steel mill. Gameslayer should be able to spot that out and mutiny it away. That would be a very, very strong decision, in my opinion. Instead, a mutiny is in fact going to land on one of Gameslayer's pleasure domes. Well, I guess that'll work. Certainly gets something done. Whoa, Gameslayer actually going for an expansion. I'm kind of sad this hasn't been attacked yet. This is pretty obviously hologrammed, in my opinion. If you remember that Cubit got that hologram earlier, because why would he put a patent office right there? And of course, it makes sense for it not to look like a scientific steel mill.
Scientific colony expanded.
Because, well, Cubit can't build those, and he had to build something there. When all has been said and done at this point, Gameslayer has managed to push his scientific colony up to HQ level 5, interestingly enough, driving that steel price up in the process of doing that. Might want to take advantage of that somehow, and he's also expanding into an additional off-world market, at least one, after getting to that HQ level 5. Yes, yes, mutinies are still going down everywhere. Oh man, he put another goon squad up here. I guess it was only a 20,000 goon squad, probably not a terrible decision, actually. And now we are seeing a move into steel mills. So Cubit's on 2 off-worlds, Gameslayer will be on 3 momentarily with the thinking machines. Gameslayer with a cash advantage, an off-world market advantage. Expansions are exactly the same, although Cubit, I would say, has a lot more tiles committed to power. But that's not wasted tiles at this point. Gameslayer with just a small amount of debt to pay through. Gameslayer with the serious patent advantage. It does look like Gameslayer and Cubit, or sorry, Gameslayer and Saberman might be the guys to end up taking this one, but this has been a lot closer than literally any other game we've had, I think. A lot more interesting play in the late game here. Gameslayer's getting there, 350. He now needs 651 to close out this game, but with the stock advantage, with the cash advantage, with the off-world market advantage, with the patent advantage. No engineering labs this game, definitely worth paying attention to. I don't know how he's... I don't know if he'll do this one wrong. Off-world market, getting mutinied and fought over here. Very nice to see. Still 3-2 in favor of Gameslayer when all is said and done with those off-worlds. Gameslayer likely, the way he's acting... Oh man, is Cubit actually up to 3? Well, Cubit's kind of up to 3 now. These mutinies are fighting over them pretty aggressively. So we're actually at an even off-world market status now that this one has been constructed as well. Still, with thinking machines in favor of Gameslayer, he can pretty recklessly go after Cubit with those mutinies, with those dynamites. And then if Cubit hits back, well, Gameslayer's not going to care, because thinking machines is just going to hold on to it for him. How are we looking at this point? Gameslayer at 574 out of the 658 that he needs. We're not actually seeing the percentage up there when we look at Cubit, but that's okay. I think he's going to close this one out momentarily. Cubit needs, just to make sure we note it, 942. Just that one little bit of stock difference makes all the difference in the world once Gameslayer has caught up in HQ levels. And Gameslayer, literally, like the instant that red button appears, Gameslayer takes it. He is hungry for this one. He wants to get it done. And, well, he pulled it off that time. That was very nice to see. That was an interesting little late game between those two. But Gameslayer clearly making the right moves, getting into those off-world markets early rather than expanding the headquarters. Paid off very, very nicely for him when you combine it with the fact that he had that patent office that was churning away for so long. Let's take a look and see what Gameslayer actually picked up before he got rid of that thing. Superconductor, financial instruments, and virtual reality were all researched. Nanotech was auctioned, and then I believe thinking machines was also researched. I don't believe that was auctioned off at any point in that game. So those are the 4 patents that Gameslayer said, I want these. Teleportation was already gone, and he couldn't actually get that one, so that's worth paying attention to. And I think that was it. I think that was the only one that was actually gone. Oh no, Veivi also had carbon scrubbing and perpetual motion. I think both of those from auctions. So Gameslayer might have wanted those. Couldn't get them. Probably didn't care all that much. But we can see those were the 4 patents he prioritized, and then Nanotech getting auctioned. He probably would have taken that anyway. But picking it up from auction, never a bad thing. Alright, tech was completely irrelevant. Nobody built an engineering lab, although it might have worked out that game. And man, these pleasure domes. They weren't as relevant this time, but mostly because they were just stealing 2 tiles away from everybody else. And there's no doubt that that was another just small edge that Gameslayer had the whole game. So that quicker found, even on what looked like maybe the slightly less desirable place from both Saberman and Gameslayer, seemed to pay off pretty well. They got most of the tiles they wanted and they were able to run away with it. Well, that's all we got to look at for that one, I think. Let's go ahead and get that next one hosted, although I will be going AFK for just